I'm recording this lecture again. As you've seen, I record all lectures, but if I ask you a question and you answer, I will repeat the question. I will repeat your answer, just so it gets recorded. So thank you, those of you who were here yesterday who did answer questions and things like that. That was really helpful, I think. We're continuing the lecture we had yesterday, which was about deciding whether to invest in a project. And yesterday and for the first half of today, particularly, we are focusing on the financial side of how you make those decisions. And as I was pointing out yesterday, this is now moving on to stuff you need for the individual coursework. So one of the things I said yesterday was you will need to do some analysis. You will need to look at potential costs and how we might view those costs. And then the other thing we would like to do is look at alternatives to the way that the solution suggested by the coursework will direct you, that there are other alternatives. And the whole idea of the second coursework is that you're putting a concept to the management of the company you work for, right? The senior management. Normally, the IT people are not in senior management of a company. They often will not be involved in any of the directors' meetings and things like that. Or the IT director may well be brought into those meetings, but they will not be an executive member of the meeting. So any decisions made by the company will not be directly influenced by the IT director having a vote, or the software director or manager having a vote in the decision making, but they will have gone along and presented their solution to the management of the company. And this happens at all sorts of levels of companies, big and small. In smaller companies, possibly the IT manager is one of the directors anyway, in which case they will have influence directly. But in any case, as you guys and you move on in your careers, you will fairly shortly find yourself in a position where you are being asked for your opinion on this sort of thing. So it's a good thing for you to start thinking about now. How do I make decisions about whether or not to make changes, to expand the staff, to do other things within the company? And as I say, it's not that long. Some people I know were in this class a couple of years ago who were already leading software departments in fairly large companies since they left. You know, they went straight into a role that was a management role of IT software systems in the company they went into. Obviously, that was somebody who'd finished a year 4 and already done an internship and had a lot more going for them than a new graduate did. So they're an ordinary non-Nottingham University year in industry plus 4 years person would have. Now, that doesn't mean that you won't be doing it fairly soon after you get employed as well. In fact, I'd say it's fairly high on the likelihood list. So yesterday we looked at some background stuff which I put in based on my own experience, and you'll see all those notes online if you go to the video that is linked in there. So we're starting with finance, and we had this simple idea: if you were offered £1,000 now, or £1,000 in a year's time, what would you do? And the obvious answer is we use it, and we try and make interest on it, and we might be able to make some interest in a year by investing £1,000. Then we looked at the whole concept that when you're investing in the future, you're looking at the future value of the thing, and you want to know what that's like at now. Because when you talk to your management and you say, we will make this much money in 5 years' time, they want to know, okay, what's its value today, so that we can compare it to how much money we have to invest. And so we looked at what's called net present value, and we worked this out using the inverse of the compound interest formula, which you should have done at least by the age of 16, probably earlier than that. It's an important, simple formula. And in order to work out the net present value, what you have to do is take this compound interest formula here and you invert it, and you get a formula which is very similar, except now it's the inverse. So the principal is now worked out on the basis of the sum you're going to get and the rate of return you are expecting to compare it against. So we looked at an example and worked through that and worked out the net, and then went on to the concept of the net present value, which is related to the cash flows in your company. So you get inflows and outflows, and we looked at an example, a very theoretical example, in working out the net present value. That was based on a company investing in a piece of machinery now that had a lifetime of 3 years. This is just a set of numbers drawn from the air, really. It's not really a proper thing. How much is it worth? Is it actually got a net present value that works out positive? I.e., are we going to invest in buying this machine? Will it make our company more or less profitable over 3 years? Now, there's more than just the finances to account for in all of this, and we'll come back to that probably next week. We'll be looking at other risks that aren't just financial risks, and I mentioned some risks which a lot of years ago when I started working in this sort of area, the companies I worked with some of them made bad decisions. I gave them good advice and they just decided to ignore it. Other companies got the same good advice and acted on it. The companies that ignored it aren't in existence anymore, and the companies that took it remain in existence and are the leading companies in the area that they work in. So my experience is that you have to be careful about just using financial things to make decisions, but the people who run companies, particularly the finance director, is always on the board of the company, and the finance director knows how to add up money, not necessarily other things. So you've got to be able to present your case against that background. And I mentioned, and I'll mention again in the later on, that one of the things nobody knew about in the earlier 90s was that the Southeast Asian markets economies would go through a really big crash in 1998, and exchange rates would disappear through the floor as far as they were concerned, or skyrocket as far as the number of dollars a number of the currencies you would get for your dollar. So those were things that you needed to think about, that just investing because the current situation somewhere is good is not a strong thing. And if you looked at the newspapers this morning, you'd see that due to a very, very small creature that is not even thought of as a creature, below creature level thing called a virus, the economies of the world are having some big troubles. And there's some huge slumps in the value of international markets. So if you were relying on investing in stock markets, you don't want to sell at the moment, because you'll get rubbish returns on your investment if you're selling now and you bought a couple of days ago. Now's the time to buy, probably. Okay, so we had to find a way of calculating cash outflows, cash inflows, and we did a small calculation on this. These are really just theoretical numbers that I flashed up yesterday. So at the beginning of the time, you have no cash inflow and you've just spent 20,000 on a machine. I think this investment would not be one I would make, by the way, because we'll work out in the end the net present value of this investment is really quite small compared to the £20,000. But anyway, it is actually positive. So at the end of the first year, you actually have sold stuff that you've made, and you've sold £14,000 worth of stuff. The next year, 15,000, and the next year, 7. These were just, as I say, random numbers, really. The end of year 1, you need to do some maintenance on your machine. It's £4,000. Year 2, for some reason, it was slightly worse, and year 3, it was less cost to you, and so you can work out your next net present value. So these are your cash flow, but then you have a present value calculation to do, which was that formula I showed you earlier. So you've got a discounted value, and the discounted rate, the present value factor, is 1/1 plus your rate of expected rate of return that you've come up with, your 10% that we came up with, that we were hoping to be able to get from other methods. And so for the first year, n is 0, year 0. So if 1/1.1 to the 0 is 1, so the present value factor of that is 1. Yeah, it's going to cost us £20,000 basically today. It's going to cost us a real £20,000 is what it's saying. The £10,000 that we'll get next year as input cash flow, as a balanced cash flow, is only worth 9,091 in today's money. Yeah, and that's because we've got a power of 1 here, and the 10,000 we get the next year is only worth 8,264, and the 5,000 we've got in the third year is only worth 3,757. If we add up these three numbers and add it to this 20,000, we should get a total discounted cash flow of £1,112, which says that there's been a positive investment. We now have a positive investment. We've got money back compared to what we put in, slightly more than our £20,000. If you just looked at the amount of money you got back, it looks like £25,000, but at today's value, it was only £1,112. Yeah? Got it? Right. So we paid from our machine, we got some extra money, but the total was only worth an extra 1,112. Okay, that's one approach to things, net present value. Most of the companies I worked with in my first year of my first job after leaving, finishing my PhD, was they were interested in internal rate of return. They were always, that was the thing they looked at. It's somewhat more tedious to calculate, but it's a fairly straightforward thing, and I believe that at least at one stage in Excel you could do a calculation fairly easily with Excel. So, and there's certainly with other financial calculating tools, it is reasonably easy to do. So in the previous thing, when we were doing net present value, we assumed we could get 10% from our investment in something else. Yeah, back in the day, there were very good returns by investing in Asian markets at the time, and so the companies that I was working with, a number of them were saying, yeah, but if I invest in Southeast Asia, I will get back money at 10%. So what's the good of the 2% that you're telling me I'm going to make? Yeah? Well, if they wanted to keep their company running, it would have been a sensible idea to think about maybe there are more factors involved than just what you can get by investing in someone else. and started looking at investing in your own company. But a lot of them didn't. Those who did are now really well off compared to those others. And the others, well, the managing director's probably living in the Cayman Islands somewhere, but the rest of the people employed in the company probably would seek his blood or her blood if he or she came back to this country. The internal rate of return is a discount rate that leads to a net present value of 0. Okay? So, it's basically saying, what's the minimum rate of return we can get that doesn't cost us money? Got it? So, if the IRR is the net 0 situation, doesn't cost us money. We can calculate it or we can use a graph. If you want to find out more about it, there is a functioning Wikipedia page which will tell you, and there's a link in the notes which are online to that page. Here's an example. Again, values randomly selected, generated set of values. We've made a smaller investment this time. It cost us £4,000, and it's doing cash flows of 1,200, 1410, 1875 and 1050. Just numbers, as I say. What we do then is put those into the net present value function. So the first year, 4,000. The second year, power of 1. And the 12,000, get it? It's this 12,000, 1,200 here that comes into there. That's at the end, that's for year 1. Year 2, it's the 1410, got it? Year 3, it's the 1875. Year 4, it's 1,050. So that's years after us. Now, if you put in those values into there and get about 0 as your output, and now you just invert this formula to get the value of R, right? R is going to be our fractional rate of return. Fortunately, you don't have to do it by hand, and you can get, and what we'll get is, if you did the calculation, that this IRR should be around 14.3. That's not exact, but if you put 14.3 in percent as a fraction into there, you will find it should work out to 0, right? But you can use, as I did, Excel to actually calculate it for you. So now what we do is to compare this 14.3 to what we can get in these Asian markets. So as at the moment, if it was yesterday, we're getting quite a severe loss. So 14.3 is brilliant. But say it was the 10% that I could have got back in I won't tell you the day I was doing this work. It was a long time ago now. But you could get around 10% by investing in Southeast Asian markets at the time. And so if these were the real figures that I've got here, then yes, this says I've got a better answer to no, let's not invest in the Southeast Asian markets. Let's invest in our own company, equipment, whatever it is that we spent our £4,000 on. Yeah. So, looks good at that one. Lots of people didn't like the answer when I was doing it. And as I say, the people who made the right choice didn't just look at the financial things, they looked at other things that will affect their own peace of mind, the continuing employment in their company, and so on. I worked with a bank who didn't look at this properly. Again, they should have done, and as a result, they underperformed in one area of their banking that they really could have performed much better in, but they didn't want to invest the money they needed to invest to improve their processes in such a way that they would actually make more business. And as a result, they lost out severely to a company which for some reason has a lot of initials as its name. There are other banks. So Is it worth it? And as I've just said, the IRR is considered to be worthwhile if an investment is considered to be worthwhile if its IRR exceeds whatever your target figure was. So if you had 10% as your target figure, then it's worth investing in the product. You may not be able to find an IRR in different circumstances, and there may be situations in which the answer is not just one number, but more than one number. Yeah, if you've got a quadratic equation or a cubic or a quartic equation, you can get positive and negative numbers as your solution, as well as imaginary numbers as your solution. Imaginary numbers are not solutions. They really don't work. They were fine when you were doing mathematics, and they're fine if you're working with electrical engineering problems where you're trying to work out the phase difference between two signals, but they are not fine when it comes to money. Imaginary numbers are not good in money terms. Okay, so that's the end of that set of slides. And now the set of slides which were meant to happen today. This is going to be a slight hiatus because I need to do that. Right. I had to fiddle with my thing so that you didn't get me flicking through my notes. You got the same, on the recording you get the same slides as you're seeing on the screen now. Okay, as I confessed yesterday, some of the material in this actually lecture were given by Ender Ozcan. I did check the numbers, and I think they're right. And in a previous class, somebody checked the numbers for me and told me they were right. So I'm assuming that Ender got them right as well. It's his problem, not mine. I'll outline my problem at another stage. Anyway, this is my bit of notes here. The rest of it, all the numbers are Ender's. My notes are about risks. Some risks are hidden. Yeah? You can't tell what they are. Some risks that are hidden, we would like to minimize this. So some famous American what do they call them? Foreign secretary, whatever they call their foreign secretaries, once said there are known knowns, known unknowns, and unknown knowns. And anyway, we want to minimise the unknown risks. But if they're unknown, how do you minimise them? Well, you try and investigate what all the risks are. You try to put everything on the table. There are IT ways of doing this, management ways of doing this, that we need to look at. So everything we try to do, we have to stop and we say, if we don't do that, that's our first thing we say. If we don't do this, what's the risk? Yeah? If we do it, what's the risks? Right? What we need to know is how likely is something to happen. How likely is it that your entire workforce will not be able to return after Chinese New Year holiday because a coronavirus has made it impossible for them to return, and it's not safe for them to leave their houses? Now, generally speaking, year on year, we would have said very small, wouldn't we? This year, we might be thinking differently about this one. This one could be slightly greater. Okay, so how likely is it that somebody in your family went to northern Italy at the same time as a coronavirus arrived there? Anybody? Oops. Okay. So, how likely is it? How important will the impact be? In this case, with the coronavirus thing, it's being very significant. But it was very unlikely. You know, I can't imagine people saying, no, nobody's coming back after the New Year's break. They're all going to be sick and staying in bed. No, it's just so difficult to do. but we have to have some idea, okay? Now, far more important, far more frequently, what happens if Netflix entire server system went down? Yeah? What happens? Somebody's done a denial of service attack on Netflix. All their servers have gone down. How important is that? It's pretty vital, yeah? So what do they do to try and mitigate that situation? Backups. Mirrors? Yes? It's more than one site, isn't it? You don't just have one server doing that. Here in the university even, they try to do some backups. In the School of Computer Science, every night the system records are backed up onto pluggable, unpluggable disks, hot pluggable, unpluggable disks that are taken away and put in a fireproof cupboard, not cupboard, fireproof cabinet outside of our building. Yeah. So, if, as happened not so many years ago, the building across the road over there burns to the ground overnight, and flames start spreading over the sky, and if they didn't make it to the computer science, but they could have done. But very soon afterwards, we would have been able to have our server data back up, yeah, because it was there was a copy of it in a safe. Now, it would have lost transactions that happened overnight, and a lot of computer science students work overnight, so if they've been working online, they would have just seen it go down. But most of what we do would be back up as soon as possible after the event. Yeah? Those sort of things we can make. And so I would have said one of the buildings on this site burning to the ground even before it had been finished was fairly low likelihood event. Yeah? But it happened. It's quite amazing. They rebuilt it very quickly. It's over there, I've just seen it. It really does still exist. Okay, this time it worked. So, how important is the impact? It depends. If one member of staff can't make it in tomorrow, how important is that? Depends on what they're doing, doesn't it? Yeah? If it was the head of School of Computer Science, it would have virtually no impact. If it was one of the cleaners, it would have serious impact. Okay? So, in my last lecture, which actually ended with the last half, the first half of this lecture, I gave an example of not investing in automation. The apparent risk that people saw was a waste of money because they could get a better IR by investing overseas. What they hadn't seen was the Asian currency crisis, which wiped...
I just had a quick question.
Yes?
With the example that you just gave, does that mean that the cleaners should be paid more than...
That's a good point I've been thinking about with all the UCU adverts about striking.
If they just go on strike, I mean, all the toilets and everything...
Yes. Believe me, when the dustmen in this country went on strike, that would be probably before you were born, I would imagine. They all went on strike. It was pretty amazing, the impact. Yeah? What happens if the ambulance people go on strike? Yeah? Compared to computer science lecturers going on strike. Yeah? So who should be paid the most? Good question. Certainly, I think people's pay levels are an interesting one to look at. So we will look at more about other risks in next week. Gail has promised me that's one of the things she's going to do when she does the lectures next week. Okay, what I've been trying to do is develop A novel treatment for amblyopia. Now, how many of you here have amblyopia? You don't know. Sorry? What is it? You don't wear glasses. Have you ever worn glasses? Yes? Did you ever have an eye patch as a child? No. So you haven't had amblyopia. They would have tried eye patching on you, unless you refused to wear the patch when your parents said, do you have binocular vision? If you go to a 3D movie, can you see the 3D? Yes, then you almost certainly haven't had amblyopia if you've not been treated for it. If you've been treated for it and you can see the 3D videos, then you may have had amblyopia. And I can see in 3D, but I have amblyopia. It's where one of your eyes doesn't work as well as the other one by a significant amount. And if you're not needing to wear glasses, then it's not true. The significant difference would be... So it's about 4% of the population who have this thing, and I mean the world population, not just the UK population. It's peaks in computer science departments. So once I was talking to a group of 5 people outside an office in the technician's office in computer science department, and every one of them had amblyopia. I thought, this is impossible. Statistically, that's not likely. What happened? It's like going into a class of people and everybody in the class is left-handed or something. It just doesn't happen. But this did. Anyway, so it's a lovely thing, and we've developed a treatment that works. It even can work. It can even have an impact on 60-year-old pharmacy lecturers, because we've done it. And so there's an opportunity. But our risk is what happens if it doesn't sell. So if we invest in selling this thing, we have a risk. What if it doesn't sell? How much will it cost me to put that device into action? What's the risk if it doesn't sell? What if we do nothing? Yeah? What happens if we do nothing? We don't lose anything, but the product doesn't get made. Yeah? Unless somebody else is making it and they make the profit that we could have made. Or somebody else is threatening to make it. Yeah? Now, there is another company threatening to do this. They don't know as much about the science as we do. There is a games company called Ubisoft who have tried to do it, but they really don't know enough about the science to do it, so I think they've given up. There is another company who are fairly well off with the science, but they haven't done the clinical trials properly yet, whereas we have. So we've got advantages and disadvantages, and we have to weigh those things up. And as we go to investors, what are we going to do to sell our idea? Yeah? I've got to go to somebody and say, I need somewhere between 400,000 and £750,000 to do this. Yeah? To get this to work. Are they going to invest in me? What would you do? If you had, yes, you've got £750,000.
No.
No! Oh, rats! Okay.
If the risk is low.
If the risk is low, what's the risk?
Well, you need to tell me.
Yeah, I need to tell you what the risk is. What am I likely? How trustworthy am I? Turns on my previous history. So what would you do? Do you know what it's called? What you would do before you invested in me? Do you know what the... Sorry? Risk analysis. It's called due diligence, the process. Due diligence. They would do due diligence on me. They would check that I'd done products that actually worked. Yeah? And have I done products that actually work? If certainly I've got some good record. I won't go into this. I'm not trying to boast about myself. But we've got products out there that are keeping people alive who weren't going to be kept alive if they didn't have the product. So we've got some track record. Yeah, we've not necessarily. We've got I think compared to the other company that are doing it, we've got better hope of getting it into the American market. So we've got reasons for doing it with us. But that's what the company will do. They'll do due diligence on us, look at us. They will ask us questions. We've had to produce a business plan that actually states how we're going to do the selling. I've had to bring in a management consultant type person who's a marketing consultant, very experienced, working in medical field, selling into this very area. So we've got some things. The poor young man, he's done 8 years of this, so he's fairly experienced. He comes from Wuhan, by the way. So, is there a way to mitigate the risk? Is there anything we could do with the equipment that might have better chance of winning? Because 4% of people have amblyopia. So, could we modify it to solve some other problem? There's a big issue, very big issue, right? And that's what the coursework is going to be about. There's the measurement of visual fields in small children is virtually impossible to do, but everybody in the UK should have their visual field measured. Yeah? Getting it done is very difficult. For small children, it's extremely difficult. For adults, the current equipment they've got costs something like £80,000. Okay? So if we could get our stuff out there with a cost of about £7,000, there's a possibility, yeah? But will people buy it? There's all sorts of other things you're going to have to investigate in the field of optical products, which you're going to have to find out about. But there are more general things you need to do. And if life gets very difficult, I'll end up giving you figures to help you out, all right, in terms of places to go. I won't just leave you and say, go find out what the competitors are, what the problems are, etc. I will actually guide you towards the right places and give you some input. Okay? So what you would have to do if you were in our company would be to try and convince the directors that they really should do this thing. Yeah? Now I've only got another 10 minutes to go. So what we're going to do is to look at constructing a payoff table to represent the decisions in the problem. And we're going to take, it says here, two maxi-min and maxi-max criteria to analyse this. And we're actually going to do a third one after that. Have you heard of maxi-min or maxi-max? No. What do the AI people teach you? Okay. So what we're going to do is to, the third way we do it is to do the expected monetary value criterion. And we're going to look at why we're doing these things and what their strengths and weaknesses are. So, many decisions are made under conditions of uncertainty. Basically, the one I'm giving you to do for your coursework is being made under a condition of uncertainty. You can't be sure what the outcome will be. We're going to look at the three simple things we'll show how some problems can be represented as decision tables, right? So, first of all, we have expected values. These will underpin many of the methods that we'll be applying to decision problems. The expected value of x is the long run average of x, right? Not the instant value of x. So, if you were deciding to invest in tech stock today, and you took today's value as the only indicator, you would be saying, not sure. If you looked back over the last year, you would have a more positive and rosy experience, yeah? If you were in 2007 and you were looking at finance stocks, you would say, whoa, no brainer, yeah? We're going to invest. If you now did it and looked back over the last 10 years, you wouldn't be quite so sure, yeah? Particularly if you look back over 12 years to 2008, when the subprime mortgage fiasco came to a head, yeah? Those who knew it was coming made a load of money out of subprime mortgage fiasco, but everybody else ended up with brown boxes of their stuff to take home. So we don't just take today's values of the stock market as the decider about what we're going to invest in. Yeah? I don't want to show how ancient I am, but before mobile phones were very popular, there was a phone system in use in this country. The major manufacturer for that company was based in Beeston, and they were doing really well. And along came the concept of 3G, and everybody said, who's going to use this stuff? Who's going to use mobile phones to look on the internet? Nuts to you. We're not going to invest in that. And this company just went through the floor for absolutely no reason. Within a couple of years, they would have been... You were crazy not to invest. But they went bust. They're gone. They no longer exist. Because people took today's situation and didn't think, what's going to happen? What's happening? They didn't look at the possibilities. They looked at what's happening today. And that was just 3G. Now we're on to approximately nearly 5G. Why isn't it called G5, not 5G? Why is it 5th generation rather than generation 5? Anyway, we need to take a decent length of time over our average of our results. So the expected value then is the sum of the probability of a thing being at a value I times the value I, the value at I, so xi of all the things over the thing. If we were to look at, well, these notes now, this is where I'm certain these next bits are correct. If we were to throw a fair six-sided dice a number of times, what's the probability of coming up with a 1? Without looking at the notes, you should work this one out. 6 sides of a die, what's the probability of a fair dice throwing one of the particular faces? 1 in 6. Yes, it says on the notes. Okay, 1 in 6. So the average of the 6 numbers is then 3.5. Yeah? Right. What about roulette? Any of you play roulette? No, not Russian roulette. Please don't play Russian roulette. Under no circumstances should you ever think of playing Russian roulette. Okay? The outcome can be catastrophic. It may be 1 in 6 chance of being catastrophic, but that is completely and utterly the thing to avoid. Okay? No, just ordinary roulette. I'm not promoting roulette. By the way, at the end of this note, I will say, don't try roulette. It's not worth it. But a US type roulette wheel has 38 equally likely outcomes, so long as there's nobody fiddling it underneath with magnets and things. So the probability of each number is 1 in 38. Now, that's great. What's the odds? What do they give you? Well, they'll give you 35 to 1. So if you've placed $1,000 on the 7 and the 7 comes up, they'll give you 35,000 plus your initial bet back. Yeah? 36 times your bet. What's the expected outcome of placing a $1 bet? Well, it's 37/38. Okay? 37/38. Because 38 times it's going to come up. 37 of those, it's not going to come up with your number. Yeah? Okay, so if you multiply that by the number you first thought of, the value of each thing for $1, then you're losing your money. It's a minus approximately $1, the answer. Yeah? It's actually 37/38 of $1, but it's still a loss. Oh, sorry. Do it all properly. It's actually 3. On the mean value would be 3p or 3 cents. Yeah, that would be the mean value outcome rather than the actual value. Because most of the time you lose your dollar. And what's happened to my mouse? Most of the time you lose your dollar. You lose $1. 1/38 of the time you get $36. So the total is a negative 3 cents. The bank wins. You know, for every person playing who wins. Why didn't my father ever understand this? Okay, sorry. Enough personal issues. We have to stop there. Tomorrow I would like to do a beginning of a workshop on thinking about risks involved in making investments, particularly the one that you are going to be made to... No, you're not going to be made to invest in. The one that I'm going to make, I'm trying to make other people invest in my company. But I will be I'm working towards, with this coursework, with this workshop tomorrow, the coursework that is the individual coursework. When you come tomorrow, please... You just need to work in groups. It doesn't have to be your own group. Okay? But come and be ready to talk to other people in the class. Okay, so I will probably be continuing this lecture at a later date, and I will see you tomorrow at the workshop. Is tomorrow the workshop? Yeah. Okay, thank you.